Now that we've looked at the 4 common types of plagiarism, and we've discussed them in general, and I've also talked about how to avoid committing any one of those types of plagiarism. Let's begin this second part with specific examples of these common types of plagiarism. Let's look at the different forms and the different specific ways in which those types of plagiarism can occur. Um, when you copy and paste someone else's words or works, no matter the length or the portion, without acknowledging the source, without giving the source credit. So this practice is called copy and pasting, right? That's not acceptable, and it is a form of plagiarism. Not doing your own work and not writing your own essays, of course, is plagiarism as well. You are expected to produce original works for all of your classes, especially for your English classes in which essays have to be written. And and by original works, we don't mean that your essays must convey original ideas, meaning ideas um, that were that that are not out there, ideas that people have not thought about or come up with before. By original, we're simply concerned um, with how you convey that idea, the words that you use, the sentence construction that you use, okay, to bring alive or to express those views, right? The words that you use to convey, to express your ideas must be of your own making, must be of your own intellectual making, okay? And when you don't do that, when you employ someone else to do your work for you, to produce your work for you, you're plagiarizing, right? You're being dishonest. You're not doing your own work. And that's what the third example is. When you turn in an essay that contains plagiarized content from multiple sources without without distinguishing one source from another, and without giving each and every single source credit, you're plagiarizing. When you're submitting a paper containing content previously submitted for a grade, you're plagiarizing. This is self-plagiarism, right? When you're submitting a work with similar content, structure, organization, and construction as another person in class, you're plagiarizing. And when you're using someone else's expression word for word without quotation marks, right? You are stealing their words, okay? Without indicating, you're stealing the words. You are using the words, and in the absence of quotation marks, you are passing off the words as your own words. Because if you had the quotation marks, what that would signal to your reader is that these words are not my own. That's what the quotation marks signify. But when you do not use quotation marks around other people's words, right, you are stealing their words, because you are presenting them as if they're your own. Without the distinction of the quotation marks, your reader do not realize that they're not your own words. Then they'll just take them as your own, or they'll, assign credit to you, and um, that's not right. We've also touched on this before. When you're using someone else's sentence construction with minor alteration, right, such as replacing a word or phrases here and there, right, you're plagiarizing. Either quote or paraphrase completely in your own words, okay? Do not try to be tricky and think that you can get around or you can get away with plagiarizing by using your source's words, most of your source's construction, most of your source's words with minor changes of, a word here and there or a phrase here and there, okay? Um, that's plagiarizing. When you conflate your own materials, or you confuse your materials with other source materials without clearly distinguish your own original ideas and your source's ideas, but when you confuse them together so that your readers do not know which is your own and which is the source's ideas, you're plagiarizing. when you fail to document in-text citations, okay, when you do not give, and we'll discuss this when we get to the MLA lecture, but how you give your sources credit in the body or in the text of your essay is according to MLA style. In MLA style, you use the parenthetical citation, or you use you document your source each and every time you cite your source by giving certain information about your source in the parentheses at the end of the sentence, at the end of the in-text citation. So this slide shows, the range of plagiarism. It can range from one sentence. You can steal one sentence from your source and that will still be plagiarized. You can steal, portions of your essay. You can plagiarize half of your essay, or you can plagiarize your entire essay. Okay. My policy on plagiarism is that I do not give warning, and there is absolutely no rewrite, okay, for any essay that is plagiarized. Okay, your essays will be submitted to the Turnitin drop boxes, right? And I've made the drop boxes so that you can see Turnitin's originality report for your essay. And that report is going to be the exact same one that I'll see when I go in to evaluate your paper, and that I'll analyze when I evaluate your paper. So you have access to that. Okay, which means, if you want to make, and you also, you can also go to Turnitin.com, create a free account, right, and receive the same, and receive some sort of plagiarism detection service from your free account with Turnitin. So there are ways to safeguard, and also just know what plagiarism, and do not practice it. Do not be guilty of it. Do not commit it. Okay, but my policy is there is no warning. Okay, and there is absolutely no rewrite. Okay, the first instance of plagiarism, if it's not too excessive, okay, I'll probably give some partial credit that is short of failing. The second instance of plagiarism will be will receive an automatic 0 and a report to the deans. And a third instance, right, well, you will just fail yourself, right? It will still be a 0 and you will fail yourself out of the class. Okay, because you cannot get your average up to a passing grade if you keep failing, if you keep getting zeros for all of these really weighty assignments that you need to receive some points for, to add to your, to have something to go towards your final average. So that is my policy. Okay, and in Turnitin, this is the old version of Turnitin, but essentially what Turnitin does, it scans your content against the content in your essays, in your submission, against content elsewhere on the web, as well as content in its repository. So what it does is it highlights passages or places, okay, where that is exactly similar to other sources that it has, to other sources online, or to other sources or submissions that it has in its repository. So the different places, okay, is is distinguished by the number here, by the number, and they're also color coded. Okay, so the color matches up to the source, match up with the source's color here. So this is an example of an essay that has plagiarized content from multiple sources. As you can see, this entire paragraph here is plagiarized, right? The author's original words, there's no original words. What the author tried to do is, to steal the words, but in this instance right here in the first line, some minor words are changed, okay? But this is a complete theft of the source's ideas, source's words, and there is no parenthetical documentation further, no quotation marks. And even if there are quotation marks around this plagiarized paragraph, it will still be unacceptable because most of your paragraph must be written in your own words. Okay, you cannot compose a paragraph that's made up of other people's words. This is another example of plagiarism in which this paper contains content previously submitted. So from this here all the way to here, and probably further down, this content was already submitted by another person to a technical college in Georgia. Okay, and that's what this means, submitted to technical. Okay, so this is an example of a work that was already previously submitted. And this is using someone else's expression word for word without quotation marks. We've looked at that. This is failure to document in text citations. Okay, this here, Turnitin did not highlight. This is my own highlight, but this is a particular instance. This is an instance or an example of a paraphrasing of the writer's paraphrasing of a source's idea. So this is not theft of words, right? But this is still theft of idea because the student writer is paraphrasing the idea from a source completely in his or her own words, but they do fail to give the source credit. As you can see, there's no parentheses with the author's last name or page number to indicate that this idea, that the idea conveyed in this passage comes from another source. So what the student writer is trying to do, so what it looks like is that this is the student writer's idea when it's not. Okay, how to avoid plagiarism. You can read on your own, but please, produce original works. All right, so besides plagiarism, there are other types of source abuse and misuses as well. You can misuse a source without plagiarizing it, right? So there is ethical use and there is unethical use. And plagiarism is just one type of unethical use. Like I said, you can unethically use a source without plagiarizing it, right? So how do you do that? Well, you can abuse a source without plagiarizing it when you don't try to represent the source idea accurately and thus preserving its integrity, right? Such as inaccurate quotation or summary, or your summary or paraphrasing of the source idea is not poorly written. It's poorly written and it does not capture the original meaning or intent. This is pretty much when you're misrepresenting your source, okay, by saying that it says something else other than what it actually says. You can also abuse your source without plagiarizing your source when you take a source idea out of its original context and so that it's made to fit into your own specific context, right? You can also abuse a source without necessarily plagiarizing it when your paper relies too heavily on one source. Okay, you don't want to do this, okay, because when you overuse a source too much throughout your essay, what happens is you lose your argumentative voice. You lose your original argumentative voice so that your paper ends up sounding like it's just a reiteration or a report on what this one source is talking about, right? So it can really obscure your original argumentative or your original argument if you have one at all. Okay, and that's another thing why it's not acceptable. Another way of abusing a source without plagiarizing is that you can overuse a source material. This occurs when you patch together different ideas from different sources, right? And again, just like with the last type, when you do this, you can lose your own original voice or your original argument. Remember to use secondary sources only when needed for supporting purposes. You must always have an original thesis, and that thesis should be maintained throughout the essay. Okay, so does that conclude our lecture on plagiarism? You can find this PowerPoint on my website.